Colleagues, we know that commitments must be followed through on, and that the progress we've seen since last week is insufficient. And so for our part, the United States will continue to make the following clear. Food and supplies must be surged into Gaza immediately, and there must be humanitarian pauses across Gaza to allow for vaccinations and the delivery and distribution of humanitarian aid. A quote-unquote policy of starvation in northern Gaza would be horrific and unacceptable and would have implications under international law and U.S. law. The government of Israel has said that this is not their policy, that food and other essential supplies will not be cut off, and we will be watching to see that Israel's actions on the ground match this statement. Colleagues, we also remain gravely concerned by the evacuation orders issued by Israel in northern Gaza and are monitoring the implementation of these orders closely. Furthermore, all parties must abide by Resolution 2720 and reject any forced displacement of the civilian population, which would violate international law. And let's be clear, civilians are protected under international humanitarian law and may not be declared as combatants if they fail to evacuate. We know winter is approaching. The cold and bad weather will soon set in. 1 year into the fighting, with Hamas substantially degraded, Israeli authorities should be working with the UN and the international community on a plan for civilians to move inland. They should be facilitating, not obstructing, efforts to provide for temporary shelter, and they must restore basic services, including water, electricity, and sanitation. I repeat, the United States calls for this work to begin now. Israel must also cooperate with the UN and the international community to lay the foundation for the reconstruction of Gaza, because civilians must be allowed to return, including to northern Gaza, to rebuild their lives. That can be hard to imagine at a moment of so much suffering and pain, death and destruction. But we must continue to work toward a future where people can rebuild and where people can heal. And for that to happen, there must be a durable peace. And as we've said many times, a ceasefire with the release of all hostages could start today if Hamas, which set this conflict into motion and has no concern for the well-being of Palestinians in Gaza, would accept the deal on the table. It could happen today. Colleagues, I was devastated by the new details from Hirsch Goldberg, Poland's parents, that they shared about their son's execution. How Hirsch's limp body was found on his knees in a tunnel beneath Gaza, a bullet through his skull. How he attempted to lift up his arm, his only arm, to shield himself from the bullet that ended his promising young life. I urge some members of this council to stop turning a blind eye to Hamas's depraved deeds. Its acts of terror, its hostage-taking, its obstruction of a ceasefire deal, its use of civilians as human shields. And I urge members of this council to continue to focus on direct diplomatic initiatives that can save the lives of innocent people who did not start this war and cannot end it, but who bear the cost of it. We must all support the UN as it works with Israel to step up delivery and improve the humanitarian response efforts. This council has an important role to play, but ultimately, as I've said previously, actions on the ground more than discussions here in New York are what will bring real progress. That has been the focus of U.S. diplomacy and will continue to be our focus in the months ahead. Getting humanitarian aid in, getting hostages out, and ending this conflict. Thank you, Madam President.